After 3 years of marriage, I left after discovering my wife's affair. 1 year later, she ghosted me. The night I saw Claire with another man, my world unraveled. Sitting in my car outside the bustling Brighton Inn, I watched them walk in hand, laughing like we used to. My chest felt hollow. My fists pounded the steering wheel as my heart fractured into pieces. This wasn't the life I had built with her. It was a stranger's betrayal, and it hit like a thunderclap. That moment didn't just mark the end of our marriage. It marked the end of the man I used to be, the man who believed love could fix anything. It hurt like hell, but it also set me free. Let me take you back to the beginning. Before everything fell apart, I thought life was falling into place. In the summer of 2014, I was living in Asheville, North Carolina. Life felt like it was finally taking shape. I had a promising job as a sales director, a solid group of friends, and a clear vision for the future. And then, I met Claire at a neighborhood barbecue. She stood out immediately, confident, radiant, and effortlessly charming. Her laugh was magnetic, drawing people toward her like a flame. When she turned that energy toward me, the world around us seemed to blur. That night, as we talked, I felt like I'd found something rare. She was sharp, witty, and had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. Meeting her was like finding a missing piece of myself. And when she said, "I never thought I'd meet someone so grounded and refreshing, with a smile that could melt stone," I was done for. From that day, we were inseparable. Within 18 months, we were exchanging vows in a small ceremony under a canopy of autumn leaves. Our early years together were magic. We moved into a cozy apartment in the heart of Asheville and started saving for a house. The future felt wide open. But as time passed, the fire started to fade. By 2017, the demands of our careers began to weigh on us. My job took me on the road frequently, while Claire's corporate role required long hours and late nights. "It's just temporary," she'd say with an affectionate, tired smile. "Once I'm established, things will calm down." But things didn't calm down. The late nights grew longer, the work outings more frequent. At first, I told myself this was just a phase. I planned thoughtful date nights and cooked her favorite meals, trying to reconnect. But more often than not, she'd cancel, saying, "I can't tonight, it's work." One Friday evening, I planned a special dinner, a rare chance to spend time together. I set the table with candles and her favorite wine. But when she walked in, she barely glanced at the setup. "Sorry," she said hurriedly. "I've got to meet some coworkers, it's important." That was the moment something inside me snapped. "Do you even care?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You're overreacting," she said, brushing past me. It wasn't just that night. It was every night. The growing silence between us spoke louder than words ever could. By early 2018, the distance between us had become a chasm. One evening, while helping her unload groceries from her car, I noticed something under the passenger seat, a pink bra. I knew it was hers. But why was it there? My stomach twisted. I wanted to believe it was an innocent oversight, but something didn't sit right. That night, I barely slept. The next evening, she left for another work outing. This time, I decided I couldn't ignore my gut any longer. I slipped a spare phone into the back seat of her car, its GPS tracker silently active. Then I followed the blue dot on my screen. She was heading downtown to the Avalon Lounge, a place she often mentioned in passing. I parked across the street and waited, my heart pounding. An hour later, I saw her step out, laughing, with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, well-dressed, and exuded confidence. When he placed his hand on her lower back and kissed her, my world came crashing down. I followed them to a boutique hotel on the edge of downtown. Watching them walk in hand felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I wanted to confront them, to demand answers, but instead, I sat frozen in my car. tears streaming down my face. The next day, I confronted Claire. "Are you having an affair?" I asked. She scoffed, her tone dripping with disdain. "You're being ridiculous," she said, brushing me off. Her denial was the final nail in the coffin. I couldn't fix what was broken, and she clearly wasn't willing to. That's when I made the hardest decision of my life. I started planning my exit. Here's the continuation. As I unpacked the last of my boxes, I found myself surrounded by fragments of a life I was leaving behind. Photographs of happier times, souvenirs from trips we had taken together, and little keepsakes that had once held so much meaning. Each item felt like a piece of a puzzle that no longer fit. And the first night in the trailer was eerily quiet. I had grown so accustomed to the hum of the city, the noise of passing cars, and the distant sounds of life beyond the apartment walls. Here, there was nothing but the rustle of trees in the wind and the occasional call of a bird. The silence felt heavy at first, as if it were pressing down on me, but as the hours passed, it started to feel less like loneliness and more like peace. Rye came by the next morning, carrying a thermos of coffee and a box of pastries. He didn't say much, he never did, but his presence was comforting. We sat on the small deck, looking out at the mountains as the sun rose and bathed the landscape in golden light. "How are you holding up?" he asked finally, breaking the silence. I thought about the question for a moment before answering. "It's strange," I admitted. "I thought I'd feel lost, but I don't. It hurts, but it's a different kind of hurt, like a wound that's finally starting to heal." He nodded, taking a sip of coffee. "That's because you've stopped pouring salt in it. You made the right choice, man. You'll see." Over the weeks that followed, I settled into a routine. I worked remotely during the day, throwing myself into my job as a way to keep my mind busy. In the evenings, I explored the area around the trailer, hiking through the woods and finding solace in nature. Slowly but surely, the ache in my chest began to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of clarity. One evening, as I sat on the deck with a book in hand, my phone buzzed. It was her. At first, I hesitated to answer. I had left everything behind to find peace, and hearing her voice felt like it might drag me back into the chaos. But curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up. "Hello?" There was a pause on the other end before she spoke. "I came home and you were gone," she said, her voice trembling. "You didn't even say goodbye." I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. "I said everything I needed to in the note." "But we could have talked," she said, her tone shifting to something between anger and desperation. "We could have worked this out." "No," I said firmly, "we couldn't. I saw you. I know about the affair, and you didn't even have the decency to admit it when I asked. There was nothing left to talk about." The line went silent for a moment, and then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." It was the apology I had been waiting for, but hearing it now, it didn't bring the relief I thought it would. It felt hollow, like it had come too late to mean anything. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for," I said finally, my voice steady. "But I'm done. I'm moving on." She started to say something else, but I ended the call before she could. As I set the phone down, I felt a strange sense of closure. For the first time in months, I felt like I was truly free. The months turned into a year, and life in the mountains began to feel like home. I made new friends, found hobbies I never had time for before, and even started dating again, cautiously but with an open heart. One day, while running errands in the nearest town, I bumped into Rye at the local hardware store. He grinned when he saw me. "You look different," he said. "Lighter, happier." "I feel different," I replied. "I finally let go of all that anger and pain. I'm starting to feel like myself again." That's what happens when you stop letting the past weigh you down, he said with a knowing smile. As I drove back to the trailer that evening, I thought about how far I had come since that night in the hotel parking lot. The betrayal had been a turning point, but it hadn't defined me. It had been the catalyst for a new beginning, a chance to rediscover who I was and what I wanted out of life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the best was yet to come. The trailer had become more than just a refuge. It was a symbol of renewal. As I inhaled the crisp mountain air that morning, it was as though the world itself was inviting me to start again. The faint scent of pine and fresh paint lingered in the air, a tangible reminder of the effort I'd put into carving out this space for myself. The rising sun bathed the hills in a golden hue, illuminating every curve and shadow of the landscape. For the first time in years, I felt like I could truly exhale, my breath carrying away the weight of betrayal and heartache. Standing on the deck, coffee in hand, I whispered to myself, "I'm starting over." In the weeks that followed, the simplicity of trailer living forced me to confront myself in ways I never expected. My possessions were few, each chosen with care, each serving a purpose. This minimalist existence mirrored the state of my soul, stripped down, raw, and ready to rebuild. Mornings were sacred. I'd rise with the sun, the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the mountain air. Perched on the edge of the deck, I would watch the day unfold, shadows retreating as golden light spilled over the peaks, bringing the valley below to life. It was a stillness I hadn't realized I craved. The nights were equally poignant. Rye's fire pit had become my haven, the flickering flames a reflection of my thoughts, wild, chaotic, and slowly settling. I thought often of the life I'd left behind. The memories came unbidden. The laughter, the love, and the lies that had unraveled it all. Yet, within this solitude, another emotion began to stir: gratitude. Not for the betrayal, but for the clarity it had forced upon me and for the chance to start anew. Rye's visits became a steadying influence in my life. His wisdom, delivered in his gruff yet compassionate way, grounded me. "You're doing better than most would in your shoes," he said one evening as we sat side by side, watching the sun sink below the horizon. "It still hurts," I admitted, staring into the fading light. "It will," he said, "but don't let the hurt stop you. You've got a second chance, Paul. Don't waste it." His words lingered with me, a mantra I carried as I settled into a new routine. I worked remotely during the day, using my free time to explore the trails that wove through the nearby forest. The rhythm of hiking, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the rustle of leaves in the wind became meditative. The mountains, with their quiet strength, stood as a testament to resilience, and I began to draw strength from them. It was during one of these hikes that I met Emma. I had noticed her ahead of me on the trail, crouched over a mountain bike with a flat tire. Approaching her, I saw the frustration etched on her face. "Need a hand?" I asked, catching my breath. She looked up, relief washing over her features. "I wouldn't say no. This thing's been giving me trouble all day." As we worked to fix her tire, we fell into easy conversation. She was new to the area, drawn here by the same need for solitude and clarity that had brought me. Her quick wit and warm smile made the work feel less like a chore and more like the start of something unexpected. "Thanks, Paul," she said when we finished, her hand brushing against mine as she stood. "You're a lifesaver." From that day on, our paths seemed to cross more often, each encounter deepening the connection between us. Emma was a breath of fresh air, curious, kind, and full of energy. Our friendship blossomed as we explored the trails together, her laughter echoing through the forest. It wasn't long before Emma asked about my past. Her tone was careful, her curiosity genuine. I told her about the betrayal and the pain it had caused, about the decision to leave everything behind in search of peace. She listened intently, her gaze steady. "That must have been so hard," she said softly. "But it sounds like you've come a long way." I nodded, surprised at how unburdened I felt sharing my story with her. "Being here, it's helped me see things more clearly. I don't regret leaving. It was the best decision I ever made." Her smile was warm, her words a balm to my healing heart. "It shows. You seem lighter, like you found yourself again." She was right. The mountains had stripped away T, forcing me to confront the person I had become. And in doing so, I had rediscovered the parts of myself I thought I'd lost. The peace I had cultivated was disrupted one morning at my favorite coffee shop. As I sipped my coffee, the familiar sound of my name cut through the quiet hum of conversation. Looking up, I froze. My ex-wife stood across the street, her expression a mix of nervousness and anticipation. Against my better judgment, I waved her over. Her words spilled out in a rush, apologies, regrets, and pleas for reconciliation. She spoke of how her life had fallen apart after I left, how she had realized too late the damage she had caused. But as I listened, I felt nothing, not anger, not sorrow, not even pity. Instead, I felt a calm certainty as I responded. "You made your choice, and I've made mine. I've built a life for myself, a better life, and it doesn't include you." Her tears fell freely as she pleaded, but I remained firm. Walking away from her that day, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. A life reclaimed. By the end of the year, the mountains had transformed me. The man who had left the city, broken and uncertain, was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, someone who had found peace in simplicity and joy in the everyday moments. As I stood on the ridge that winter morning, the valley below blanketed in frost, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal that had once defined me was now just a chapter in my story, a reminder of how far I'd come. I wasn't running away anymore. I was running toward a future I had yet to imagine, one filled with possibilities, peace, and perhaps even love. And for the first time in years, I felt whole.